What's going on? It's your boy Masta B here live from the MMB Radio Studios. For the MMB Radio Podcast, where no topic is too big or too small, we talk about them all. And on the phone lines, I want to welcome in a woman who is fairly new to the professional wrestling game, but she is starting to gain a lot of attention from everybody worldwide. She can be a little bit intimidating. She can be incredibly sweet. She's all around badass. So I want to welcome her in right now onto the phone lines. Heidi Howitzer, what's going on?
Oh, it's going well. Just another day in paradise, another lovely Monday in Denver, Colorado.
Just another Matic Monday, huh?
Yeah, pretty much.
As I mentioned, still kind of new into the wrestling world, and we're going to talk a lot about your wrestling style and your look and everything. But again, you're still fairly new to this game, and you didn't actually get into the wrestling business in, I guess you would say, a traditional way of most people. You didn't really grow up being much of a fan of the business, were you?
No. So I had all the video games and stuff as a kid because, they were fantastic for Nintendo and N64 and stuff, but I never really watched. So most of the people in my age group, so being transparent, I'm 31, they watched the Attitude Era and everything, and that is the pinnacle of wrestling for them. So a lot of the wrestlers I get in a ring with and everything, yeah, they were huge wrestling fans growing up, and I really didn't start watching wrestling until I was probably in my early 20s.
Okay.
So yeah, a little different than most people, or at least than most independent wrestlers out there.
So what got you hooked into doing it? I mean, because in your early 20s, I mean, some people are going the college route, some people are going to the college party route. What made you say, you know what, I'm just going to be a wrestler?
So a couple things. So it's kind of interesting. So I'm flipping through channels one day, and I landed on an episode of SmackDown, and I think it was Sheamus versus somebody. He's pretty memorable because he's a giant white ginger. And I'm this is ridiculous. This is crazy. It's different when you start watching at a later age than when you're a kid, because the believability factor is already way lower than when you're a kid, right? Some of that magic aspect is gone, but it's still very entertaining. It's still sports entertainment. It's fun. So I'm well, this is kind of out there. This is a good time. I'm enjoying this. So I start watching, and two of my best friends, I was living in Houston at the time. They're huge wrestling fans, marks, if you will.
Yes.
And I started going to the VFW hall shows and stuff with them. So your not necessarily shitty indie promotions, but some of your smaller scale ones and stuff like that. So I was exposed to independent wrestling pretty early on. And so we were going to shows, loved heckling the wrestlers. Not much has changed in that regard. Now I just heckle the fans from the ring. So, reverse. But yeah, I've been going to shows for a couple of years, everything like that. And I actually started dating a guy I met online, my now husband, that I met on Tinder, so I guess dreams do come true. And he's yeah, I'm a wrestler. I'm well, that's fucking crazy. So I was going to his shows and all that stuff. And this is still down in Texas. And never really was yeah, I want to learn how to wrestle. I mean, so Booker T school is down there, ROW, but if you're familiar with Houston at all, if it's normally an hour and a half drive, if there's traffic, that becomes a 3-hour drive. So it wasn't exactly convenient to learn to train, and that wasn't high on the priority list. We moved to Colorado right at about 3 years ago now, and he had kind of retired from wrestling. He's been working 12 years now, but yeah, 10 years at the time. Decided to step away, and 6 months into living in Colorado, I had one too many beers one day, and I was hey, don't laugh at me, but I think I want to learn how to wrestle. So he's well, shit, I guess I'm getting back into it too. Thanks. So I found a local wrestling school out here in Denver, and shoot, I guess I made my singles debut in January of 2019, and been hitting it pretty hard since, or at least trying to.
So when you moved from Texas to Colorado, and your husband, decided he was going to go back into civilian life,
Yeah.
um, and not, the campy, carny life of being a wrestler. Like, what was your guys' game plan? Not to get too personal, but what was like your game plan, like financially, like what you guys would be doing? Because I know you have a regular like 9 to 5 career job, but like what
Yeah.
was your like when he said, "Hey, I'm gonna not do wrestling"? Was that his sole income at the time, or?
No, luckily, so he was a personal trainer. Now he's in gym equipment sales. So luckily, like wrestling had never been like a mainstay of income for us. And if you know much about like, well, and like any of the independent wrestlers on here that are going to listen to this, like a lot of times it's a good payday if you walk away from the show with enough money to like go through the Taco Bell drive-through after the show. So if you're trying to pay bills off indie wrestling circuit, man, Godspeed. Most of the money is typically like in merch sales and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's hard to make it's hard to actually make a profit in independent wrestling. But yeah, so we're like, okay, cool. You know, we moved to Colorado. We were going hiking a lot. We do some rock climbing, normal like kind of hobbies. We've got the network, so we watch like a lot of the old wrestling and stuff. Like early '90s WCW is my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I was just, I guess from just like watching a lot of everything like that, I was finally like, I kind of got the bug, and I was like, this looks fun. Like I think I want to do this.
Well, a couple of things I could take away from that. I can definitely not relate because obviously I've never, been a independent wrestler, but I can say being in the Philadelphia area and having lived so close to, what was formerly known as ECW Arena, 2300
Yes.
Arena. I can remember, as a preteen and, early teenager going to a lot of those shows over there. And then afterwards, right around the corner there, Tony Luke's fans buying the wrestlers like a cheesesteak or something afterwards. So the whole Taco
I can
Bell
tell
thing,
you
I
that
can
they
understand.
deeply appreciated that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, there was guys that would just like, they would sit out there. They were like the homeless, just hanging out, like hoping that somebody was a fan that would mark out and buy them a cheesesteak. It's just like, you hope you didn't
Yes.
suck enough in the ring that people are like, fuck you, go get your own
Yeah.
cheesesteak, Like,
Yeah.
you didn't want too much heat, because if you got too much heat, it didn't mean you get to eat,
You didn't get a cheesesteak.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's like
Exactly.
the perfect saying for like a shirt now, like pro wrestling tees, Too much heat, don't get to eat, So,
Yes.
um, and
Yes.
then like you said about, like I say, you can't financially live off that. So it's off of merch sales and stuff like that. But then when you started doing all of this and you got the training and everything, did you have like an idea of like how long you expected to be doing something like this? Or you just kind of like, hey, I'm just going to do this and see what happens?
Man, I'll tell you this. Nothing makes me more salty than like talking to other wrestlers or new wrestlers I meet, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm 19." I'm like, "Wow, that must be fucking nice."
What's that like? Enlighten me.
Yeah. I'm like, I wish I had started beating on my body when I was a kid instead of now. Yeah. I I think so. When I started, it's a hobby for me. I mean, like
Hmm.
you said, I had 9 to 5, but it's one of those hobbies where it's like it's grown and it's become one of those things like, yeah, I want to try to I want to do the bigger shows and I want to do the bigger dates, and it's really it's really satisfying and a lot of fun getting in there with people that are, excuse me, that are better than you. And to do that, you kind of have to start traveling and putting yourself out there. Otherwise, you just become, your your local grizzled old vet, which is nothing wrong with. But I definitely like trying to get out there more. And like you said, I'm trying to get my name out as much as possible, and even just a couple years into the business.
Hmm.
But yeah, super jealous of all the kids out there who are already getting their feet wet wrestling.
But yeah, but you got to
Because
remember too, a lot of these kids, will they even make it to the point of being 31 and still doing it? You know what I mean?
oh yeah,
You wish
yeah.
success on everybody that's in this business. You know what I mean? Like there shouldn't be any animosity towards anybody unless they're just a total douchebag to you first. But, you want to see everybody succeed and be successful. But I mean, 19 years old. I mean, geez, I think we can all relate at 19 years old. Did any of us really know what the fuck we were doing with our lives unless we
Man,
were
I
Doogie
didn't know
Howser.
what the fuck I was doing. Yeah, I tell people like I probably didn't start to like kind of feel like I had my shit together and was a real adult until probably like 27, 28, something
Yeah.
like that, which I feel like is pretty normal. And so like, but it's funny because one thing you'll notice about the pro wrestling industry is it's called professional wrestling, and there are not a lot of consummate business professionals in wrestling. There's a lot of people who never learned how to adult, we'll put it that
Yeah.
way. And I think that's one downside to the business with a lot of people getting into it really young and gaining traction is it's like they never necessarily had to have like their grown-up job or whatever or interface in an office setting or any of this other stuff. And it definitely helps being a little older and getting into this business because I feel like it's definitely helped me know how to market myself.
Mm-hmm. Now, speaking of the marketing, I mean, the look that you have, I mean, when I saw the look, I'm like, okay, it's like a cross between like Ziggy Stardust, the Road Warriors, and like Thunderdome. Like, is this like, how did you come up with this like persona, this character, this gimmick, or is this like real life? Like, how
Man,
like?
so it's kind of so wrestling is cool in that wrestling is cool, but wrestling is cool in that. So when you're developing a gimmick and developing a character, a lot of times what you're told is, hey, the best gimmicks, the best characters are going to be you just like cranked up to 11.
Yes.
And with me, so I had kind of a interesting genesis, I guess, progression of character. When I very first started, I was like, so my background is in powerlifting and strongman. So I was like, cool, I'll do and the no knee pads, wrestling boots, like old school strongman looking style. Mm-hmm. And as you can tell, that is very different from the look I have now. No face paint, none of that stuff. And I had a couple little like run-ins, tag things, whatever, like that. And like, it was fine, but it didn't feel like me. I didn't have any kind of like real connection to it. I still was going by the moniker Heidi Howitzer, but it was almost felt like a placeholder. I just looked like a, your create a pro wrestler. And so like one night I was like, I'm going to do the face paint. And so my husband, he was like, well, if you're going to do the face paint, like you have to do it every time. So,
I thought you were going to say, okay, well, now I got to bust out my face paint. Like when you say you're going to get a wrestler's, I guess I got to get my boots back out.
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly one way to find out a lot about your spouse. You know what I mean? It's like, I think I'm going to do it. Well, I guess I got to pull this. I'm like, ooh, I didn't know he was into that,
So it's like, well, shit, okay. Which like, side note, putting the war paint on, tedious. Taking the war paint off, such a pain in the ass, man. Like, I love it. I love the look. I couldn't do it without it, but man, like, especially I always forget I have it on, like after shows, I'll be going through a drive-through and they like just side-eye me real weird. I'm like, oh yeah, I look like a freak right now. But
that's one way to get free food.
Yeah.
Just give her whatever she wants. Psycho bitch at the drive-through.
Yeah. Please don't hurt us, scary lady. So I started doing the war paint. But then I had the war paint and I had a singlet, and then I was like, well, I love like the Mad Max look and everything like that, and I wanted I really like crafting and shit. So I was like, I'm gonna make like these like cool looking shoulder pads because like a huge sci-fi fantasy nerd. So I did that. Still had the singlet. I went to a seminar, I believe it was a Rise seminar with Mercedes Martinez and Soraya Knight, and they ripped on me about my gear. So
that's always welcoming.
Yeah, no, they love, they're like, your money on the mic, but you look like you're wearing a banana hammock. And I'm like, fuck, okay, I guess I got to change that. So, but the first part was flattering. So I'm like, okay, I'll take that. So then I grunged up some like Lululemon shorts and like a crop top and was rocking that for a while, like just made it look all like gross and post-apocalyptic looking, and was doing a combo of that and like some USA America like assless chaps because I love a cheap pop, and USA is a real easy way to get that.
I thought you were going to say assless chaps was a good way to get that.
That too. I know how to get followers, and it's donk. Heidi Howitzer knows her core audience. It's all ass fans. But yeah, so like I've always been a big Road Warriors fan, and like I said, big sci-fi fantasy nerd. So like I slowly evolved this thing into becoming more and more like that kind of look, and it really started working for me. And then I was doing that pretty much the full like post-apocalyptic thing. Because you look like a badass, but you come out here and do all this goofy shit. Like, yeah, I do that. So it's like, okay, like maybe I can like brighten this up, lighten it up, make it a little more fun looking, so I can get like, so I can do both of that without just looking like I should be coming out here and Road Warrior style, just whipping someone's ass. That and like I was peripheral aware at the time of Max the Impaler, my now tag partner. And they were doing the post-apocalyptic badass thing like way more believably than me. Max is terrifying, but like in the best way. So highly recommend anyone who is not familiar with Max the Impaler, look them up on Twitter, Instagram, whatever, and prepare to be very frightened. But yeah, so I was like, cool, I'm gonna make this brighter. I'm gonna like go for like do like the whole like cyberpunk thing. I wanted like the same aesthetic as like the old school like 90s ugly ass paper cup. So I really think I accomplished that. But yeah, I guess like that was the really long spiel, but that's how the gimmick kind of came about. Is I took all of my interests and everything like that, and like it's one of those things like the gimmick is never done. Like you're constantly retooling it and you're constantly changing stuff until you find something that works for you. And I feel like I'm finally like that retooling into doing the more like kind of cyberpunky type post-apocalyptic shit has really served me well, I think.
Now, and I hate to always keep referencing to this on almost every episode since the pandemic started, but you did mention being in quarantine. What was your mindset going through all that? I mean, obviously wrestling was not your sole, income, but a lot of people, were affected by this as, weren't able to do live shows and now slowly starting to do some things again. So what was kind of like that your mindset going through that whole period? Were you thinking that like, this is it, like I'm not going to be able to do wrestling anymore, or eventually I'll be able to get back into it? Kind of take us through the mindset of that.
Yeah, so that was as most of the wrestlers, really just anyone can attest to, it was stressful as shit. I mean, it's still stressful. Mm-hmm. It's really kind of changed the landscape of independent wrestling a lot, and professional wrestling. Also, sorry for any barks, I have 3 dogs.
I thought maybe that you just had like a Tourette thing and you were just, barking out.
Yeah, I just like
thought that was just part of the gimmick,
Yeah.
Who am I to shit on your ideas,
I'm like 50 Cent or whatever, or Exhibit. I don't remember who the fuck it was who barks in the mic. I think it's 50 Cent. Yeah. No, it's DMX. What am I, man? Yes. I'm like, yeah, DMX. There we go. I knew it would come to me eventually. But yes, pandemic is stressful because it really changed the landscape for a lot of that. There's been more wrestling like tapings, tournaments, that kind of stuff. I just did one for Daily Wrestling the other week in Vegas, because you don't have to have a live audience. And for a gimmick, and I guess a performer like myself, it's hard for me without an audience, mm-hmm. just because I interact with the audience a lot in my matches, when there is an audience, yeah. And I feed off of that a lot, and like you'll talk to other wrestlers, it's the same thing, you'll like have a rest hold on or something, and it'll feel like you're there forever, and it'll be like 15 seconds because you don't have any like crowd to interact with, to feed off of, to figure out like how you're pacing yourselves. It's hard to measure really like, hey, do I need to like do more? Do I need to do less when you don't have that live feedback? So that really takes getting used to. Now, that being said, we've all like done the Outlaw Mud Show type show where there's like 5 people in the audience, even non-pandemic times, but it's a little different now. And that was hard when it first started too. I mean, I was getting bookings kind of, but not definitely not at the rate that I was previously. And now like, yeah, I've got, my dance card is starting to fill up, but it's not like it was pre-pandemic. It's just harder for like, especially if you're trying to make loops and get your name out there. It's hard for promoters to justify bringing out-of-state talent in when they've got to book their local guys, and the money's tight because you can't have large crowds. So the show's no longer paying for itself. So I mean, it creates a lot of issues, and I'm hoping with the vaccine and everything, things start to open up a little bit more, because it's just not the same without a big ass crowd.
And I've seen places already start to hold some shows. I mean, obviously you see the bigger networks or bigger companies, holding events with crowds and, wrestlers ringside. But I have seen some indie shows where they've had, small minimum crowds. And I don't know if that's a socially distanced crowd or if that's like a regular packed house crowd. But, you're starting to see a little bit more opening up. But something that I wanted to ask, because I got a lot of people that always would ask me questions to ask guests. And a lot of people that are trying to get into pro wrestling, and, not all of them have the luxury of having a spouse or somebody closely to them that's already been through the trenches of getting their name out there and getting started, their name to get bookings. I mean, you're saying you're starting to get them. What advice would you give someone? I mean, even now it's even harder, like you said, with the pandemic. But prior to pandemic, like, say I'm training and now I'm like, all right, I kind of know some things, but I'm only kind of just doing stuff locally. How do you get your name out there so that you're traveling a little bit more?
Sure. So there's a couple things, and so I kind of come from a background before this. I freelance, classically trained tuba player, so was used to getting my name out there for gigs before wrestling even. But with wrestling, so there's a couple things that are really important. You'll hear from some people, they'll say never work for free. I believe that to an extent. Once you get decent and people, there's name recognition and brand recognition. Yeah, then don't work for free. That being said, like, when you're still pretty new and you're trying to get your name out there, and you're likely probably sorry, dogs. And you're likely probably kind of the shits. And that it is what it is. I mean, that's everybody. I mean, I'm still occasionally the shits. And it's a lot of it is just reaching out to promoters. Make sure you have some kind of wrestling resume with your stats, who you were trained by, any match, like local match footage you have, like preferably, at least one or two in different styles or in different scenarios. Highlight reel is good to have. And honestly, you can find, there's so many people that are good with like video editing tools these days. You can find someone to make you a good highlight reel for anywhere between $30 and $50. Yes, you can pay more for one, but if you just need something to be able to send out to promoters, that's going to be really good. Get good headshots taken. I mean, I can't say it enough for that. Obviously, like you mentioned, my look. Yeah, being able to look different. You can, I shouldn't say this, you can be the shits in the ring. If you've got a cool look, people are going to book you. And it's true. And hopefully you're not the shits, but it does definitely cut you some leeway if you look different than everyone else they've got on their roster. And so, like, on that note, with professional headshots, yeah, you can pay someone to get them done, or like a lot of my promo photos I took with my cell phone and used like Photoshop and stuff to make them look professional. So, there's a lot of tools for you to be able to do that. That, and then wrestling, just like any other performance art or sport, is very largely networking based. So make sure wherever you're training, and the people you're interacting with are people that can, eventually, this sounds selfish, but it can benefit you, because that's going to be the easiest way to get booking somewhere, is by knowing someone who can vouch for you that's already worked somewhere else. It's huge. That's always going to be word of mouth, and someone being able to be like, yeah, this person can go, you should book them. I've had promoters I've reached out to where I don't even have to send them anything, because they're like, oh yeah, no, I've already heard about you, or yeah, we follow you, and cool, awesome. That makes my life way easier because I don't have to do the whole song and dance. But yeah, present yourself as a professional, have good pictures, have match footage, have some references. Just just like you were applying for a job, man, but it's wrestling. So,
Mhm.
so there's that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fun job to have, but you really have to invest in yourself and kind of etch out some of that time to kind of polish yourself, like you said, get the highlight reels, do the headshots, do all the, what it's going to be tedious work, but in the long run is probably going to help you, get some of those bookings that you're craving.
Yeah, because there are plenty of wrestlers out there that are as good, if not better than me, but by looking different and having something kind of unique about myself and knowing how to present myself, that's going to get me bookings. So just like anyone else, especially, man, guys have it even harder than women because there's a ton of athletic guys out there that can wrestle, but if you want to get bookings at like any of these bigger companies, you've got to have something different about you, or be able to, be annoying enough that you can harass the booker enough times that they book you, one or the other.
That's funny is, I'm watching last night, just flipping through channels and watched a little bit of American Idol. And as a DJ, I probably should be watching it a little bit more, but I kind of say to people that are not familiar with wrestling, they're kind of like picking my brain. They know, I'm a big mark, and they're like, oh, well, let me pick his brain about wrestling. And I always compared it to the music world or something like American Idol. And I said, in the early days of American Idol, you could probably get by with, if you had a really good voice. And that was it. But now it's like, that's the whole thing. It's the whole package. It's American Idol. So you have to be a little, like I said, campy and quirky to kind of get people's attention. And it was funny. There was a girl last night on there that was just, when she came out there, it was a WTF moment when you saw her. And you're like, what is this? But she ended up getting like a golden ticket to go on to Hollywood. And I'm thinking, yeah, because she's somewhat good at singing, but she's different. She's weird. She's like, like annoying. And like I think Katy Perry even said she was annoying, but it was like, but that's what got, she was memorable, So it's like for some of these wrestlers, it's like, it's not like it was back in the day where it's like, if you were, some beefcake dude that was just, big and jacked that, you could be, shitty in the ring, but you had the look, now it's like, you got to be somewhat good, but you also have to have this look that makes you stand out from everyone else.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Like if you want to look like, if you look like everybody else, you better be really fucking good in the ring.
Yeah.
That and or be really good at talking. Some combination of the two. But yeah, you'll notice like even like at the level like WWE, AEW, like all the big 3-letter name wrestling companies, the guys you see that don't have like a particularly unique look are the ones who are really, really, really fucking good.
Yeah.
So that's, and unfortunately, your girl can't jump very well and isn't very agile. So I have to be charismatic.
Wait, you're not a professional in the lucha libre, like spot style, Oh.
I'm actually going to go train lucha libre tonight for my first time. I'm very excited. Yeah.
Nice.
Speaking of
Heidi the spot monkey. Uh-oh.
Oh God. Yeah. Yeah. Heidi the hide in the corner and hope I don't have to spots monkey.
Now, one of the things you mentioned in your answer there is, it's easier, or a little bit easier for women to get into it. And when we were booking this podcast and getting you on, I said, let's do it in March. It's Women's History Month. Kind of like, what does it mean to be a woman in the wrestling community and in the wrestling world? Because, I mean, it seems like, within the last, I would say, 10 to 15 years, it's just seeing an influx of women talent finally getting their just due. Like, I'm a big, advocate for women's wrestling. I sometimes honestly enjoy the women's wrestling more than the men's style. And it's not just the TNA stuff, people, so don't at me. Has nothing to do with that.
What's wrong with Impact?
But no, it's just like the talent in ring. It's just, I don't know. It's just like I guess the thing I'm excited, I get interested in, is because I'm seeing something different. When you've grown up watching wrestling, you've just seen guys in the ring forever. When you start to see something that's new and different, you're like, oh wow, this is really cool. So what does it mean for you to be able to be a woman in this business and kind of trailblaze that, hopefully 50 years from now, you're like, wow, these were people that were doing it at the bottom and, kind of made it into something.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's very much kind of a different animal than male wrestling. And one thing too, like, I mentioned, it can be harder for guys because there's so many of them. Well, then you have to look at it the other way too, because as a woman trying to get a booking on a show, a lot of these shows only have their token one women's match on the card. That is kind of changing. And now we've got promotions out there that are all female promotions, Mission Prep Women's Wrestling out here in Denver, which is nice because then, you have an all female card. So there's plenty of space for you. But a lot of times it's like there might be less of us out there, but there's also less spots on the card. So that can make things really difficult. But like, it's been really just amazing seeing the progression of women's wrestling throughout the last couple decades, because one thing that's always been interesting to me and frustrating at the same on that same note is like WCW and like old WWF, they were bringing in a lot of the Japan women's talent back in the early 90s. Like, so Bull Nakano, it always sticks out with people. The Jumping Bomb Angels, Asia Kong, all these women. I mean, shit. In the U.S., then you've got Alundra Blaze, Medusa, but you've got all these women who could go, and they were going out there and taking all these big bumps and working their asses off. Meiko Satomura was in like old WCW, and she's one of my favorites. I absolutely adore her. She can. She's Murder Mom, and she's still working. She just went over to NXT. It's hard seeing like that backstep that they took in the late 90s, early 2000s, when the Divas era became a thing, and it was bra and panty matches and all this
Pillow
other
fights.
stuff. And it's frustrating because you did have these women that like Mickie James and stuff who could go, and who could have a good match, but then they're reduced to having cat fights basically, because that was the buzz, so the fact that we're finally able to get away from that, especially it's crazy to look back 20 years ago at what WWE was doing with their women's division versus what they have like now. Just in the NXT talent alone is absolutely absurd. They're disgustingly stacked in their women's division. So it's huge. So getting to be part of that is fantastic. I mean, I'm excited to get to have these fun, hard hitting matches and stuff. And it's nice too, because then I've got, I really enjoy doing the intergender stuff as well. But getting to have like good women's wrestling matches is satisfying.
Yeah, and it's crazy because I used to always say to people too, when I'm going to age myself a little bit, when I seen stuff like the like Glow, and you seen stuff on there, and it was I said it was campy, it was comical, it was supposed to be, but there was girls that were there that probably had no business being in a wrestling ring, that was just they were there for looks or whatever. But then there was other girls there that were like, wow, they're really athletic and can be doing so much more, but they're being downsized because of the overall product is supposed to be, a comic show, so it was tough. Like you said, you've seen a lot of these girls that were coming up and, they're being stuck doing, like mud wrestling. And it's just like, this is stuff that you're seeing at a dive bar on a Friday, but when you're 15, you're like, this is awesome, and then you don't realize it. So when you get older, you're like, wow, I feel bad that they had to go through that.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with like wrestling is sexy. You're all like half dressed and you're all in spandex. I mean, I like, like I mentioned earlier, I take advantage of it. I know I'm going to get more followers and more subscribers if I've got half my ass hanging out of my gear. And you know what? That's cool. Fine by me, but it's nice to be able to be both, I guess, objectified and respected at the same time. Like, hey, if you're going to objectify me, at least watch my match. and watch me kick somebody's ass. But it's come a long way. Just even in the last 5 years, it's insane. But like, I can't recommend enough like watching the Japan stuff too, because it never took that dip.
I was gonna say it was never comic relief there.
No, they're just beating the shit out of each other. It's great.
And that's the hard style, of it, that strong style where it's just, just beat the shit out of each other. But even with that, even with the men's side of it, not to go off course with that, but even the men's side, I feel like within the last maybe say 10 years of that, you didn't see a lot of the men's do a lot of the, the comic stuff either, and now I'm starting to see a little bit more of the, the flamboyant and comic side of stuff over in, Japanese promotions that you just didn't see with guys, 10 years ago.
Wrestling's interesting, like you said, like the last 10 years or so, it started to kind of become, I hate, like, Undertaker got kind of shit on recently because he mentioned like, oh, it's not the same as it used to be in the locker rooms. Yeah, it's not, but whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it's wrestling has definitely kind of turned the edge, depending on the promotion, depending on the workers, into more like the sports entertainment box, more so than just than pure sport. And again, that's very dependent from promotion to promotion, but it's kind of neat to see like all these different styles kind of meshing together.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that is, as a wrestling fan I've been a wrestling fan for over 30 years, and in no way do I say that I'm, the be all to tell all that knows everything about wrestling, but I think that's the cool thing about it is that there's different styles for different people, and that, some people, get really passionate and they want it just for the pure sport of it. You know what I mean? They're like, oh, I don't want all this like comic, sketch stuff. It's a waste. And then there's other people that are really
They should not watch Heidi Howitzer matches.
Yeah.
I'll tell them that much.
Well, and then there's other people that are really into that kind of stuff because for them, that's like, for me, I always tell people like, when people ask like, why do you watch wrestling? It's the F word, and I'm like, well, to me, it's an escape. You know what I mean? Like, why do people watch, The Bold and the Beautiful or The Young and the Restless and all these other soap operas? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what we always joke about is that we're going to watch our stories.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, it's like sometimes I watch Jerry Springer and Maury because I like to see how fucked up other people's lives are. It makes me not feel so bad about my own life. It's like I could be worse. I could be that girl who doesn't know who her baby daddy is and has had 20 people tested on this show. I feel pretty goddamn good about myself at this moment,
Yeah, it's nice and validating, right? No, like, so that's a lot of it too and that's what I always tell people when they're asking me about it. I'm like, look, even though you know what the finish is, that doesn't mean that everything in between is already predetermined. And then on that note, everything in between, the end, the beginning, we're still going out there and doing all that shit. Like, unfortunately, there's not stunt doubles when you're, you are your own stunt double when you're taking or giving the pile driver. So it's
I think ultimately people just think too much into it. I mean, it's just enjoy it for what it is. You know what I mean? When you start to overanalyze it, then it becomes like everything else in your life. You know what I mean? Like, what's the point of watching at that point?
It's the circus that really is. I mean, it goes back to even more so because of the carny roots. But it's live circus.
Now, a couple questions I had from fans, because I did field some questions, over the time that we were waiting for you to get onto the podcast. So I got some people that wanted to know a couple things. And one of the questions that I got from a lot of different people was, for you personally, what has been the biggest struggle as being a wrestler, whether it be learning something or, just kind of getting the gimmick going? Like, what has been the biggest hurdle for you in this business?
100% the athleticism and footwork piece of it. I'm very strong, but, with the strongman and powerlifting background, I can pick people up. That's not a problem. I can get them where they need to be, but being able to like ring awareness, so making sure I'm in the right spot in the ring, being able to get through the sequences without just looking like a jumbled mess. I think for like my first 6 months of matches, my husband always makes fun of me about this, I didn't like bend my knees. I just get out from the curtain and just like, I looked like a robot. It wasn't a good look. If anyone ever wants to laugh, just like go watch a Heidi Howitzer match from early 2019. It's rough. Or like really anytime. But no, the fundamentals, man, it's hard. And like, it's one of those things like you're constantly learning and changing, and it's a sport. And I mean, I have a background as a performer with playing the tuba, and I like I like doing the cracking jokes and stuff. So it's not hard for me to perform in front of a crowd, but it's hard for me to do that and do the physical part of it. So luckily I hide a lot of that with the jokes and the showmanship. But yeah, that's definitely been the hardest part for me, 100%.
Very awesome. And another fan wanted to know, what has been the most memorable moment for you inside a wrestling ring? Like, has there been to this point, I mean, in the short career that you've had so far, has there been like a career defining moment for you where you felt like you were, made it? You felt like you were, fully engulfed into this business and this is, where you're supposed to be?
So there's a couple. One that isn't so much me, but me just being happy for one of my closest friends. You went over to NXT. I got to work. I was working extra with her when she had her dark match before she got signed, and getting to see her because behind the scenes she's a very kind of reserved person, and or living dead girl, whatever, and getting to see her go out there and just fucking kill it, and now killing it on TNT on a regular basis has just been so just fucking awesome. But yeah, she's one of my closest friends and we work together a lot. We were coming up at the same time. I can't tell you how many fucking matches we've had against each other. But that was a really, really just great moment. But as for myself, two probably in particular, we've got a promotion out here called Lucha Libre and Laughs, and it's pretty neat. It's in a theater, the ring is up on a stage, and it's live comedians doing commentary during your matches. So basically just roasting the wrestlers, and they do stand-up sets between the matches. And I got to wrestle Kikutaru out there, who's a Japanese comedy wrestling legend, and that was absolutely fantastic and really validating for me that the promoter out here had the faith in me to be able to go out there and have this match with this guy and entertain the crowd. The other was probably same venue, same promotion. I had a match versus Cody Devine, and Cody's one of my favorite people out here because Cody is someone who, I'm pretty self-deprecating, and I have trouble convincing. A lot of wrestling is mental, right? I mean, just like anything else, a performance or sport. And telling myself that I could do stuff or these more athletic things, like I said, that's what I've struggled with a lot, or these big moves. And we went out there in our match, and Cody made me do a Canadian Destroyer. So that was pretty. That was pretty satisfying.
I was gonna say not the easiest move to pull off.
No.
Can go very wrong very quickly.
Yeah. So that was one of those moments where I was like, okay, maybe I need to get out of my own fucking head, and I can't do this.
That's one way to get trending on Twitter or on Instagram, and fucking up a Canadian Destroyer.
Yeah, you could see me psyching myself up for a solid 10 seconds before I even do the move. I'm clapping myself on the shoulders, all right, you got this, before
with emphasis on the word destroyer if it does not go well,
Yeah, it's rough. Yeah, and it's one of those moves where whenever they land, they always hit your bladder a little, so you always kind of pee yourself a bit. So that's fun.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's fun. Yeah, that's the insider stuff.
Canadian Destroyer.
Yes, you only hear these great kind of stories here on MMB Radio, where wrestlers, pee themselves in a ring.
Yeah.
See, it's not all glitz and glamour in wrestling. Sometimes sometimes you get shitted on, and sometimes you're doing the shitting.
Exactly.
So before you get out of here, I mean, I really want to know where, goal-wise, where you want to be. And I asked this question because I've had previous guests on, and previous guests have always told me, back in the day, and I hate to keep saying back in the day, because for one, everybody's like, screw back in the day, and two, it just makes me look old. But back in the day, I mean, everybody's end goal used to be WWE. Everybody had to get to WWE, WWF, and that was the main goal. And now there's so many different options, whether it's better or worse. A lot of fans and friends ask me, they're like, how can you watch so much of it? And I'm like, to be honest with you, there's so many options out there that
fucking much.
It's almost impossible to watch everything. And I literally broke it down as if you look at a week's worth of television between like Impact, WWE, NXT, AEW, and all their friggin' online shows. Like, I'm scrolling through Twitter and like, Cody Rhodes is like, we got a show 6 p.m. on YouTube on Monday. And I'm like, where the hell did this come from? So
You're like, another one?
yeah, I'm like,
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, I can't even keep up with all. Like, I literally would have to be glued to my television or my, my computer screen to watch everything. But with there being so many different options out there, like, what is something that you want to do? Like, is WWE something that you strive for, NXT, AEW, or you're kind of like, hey, if I make it there, good. If not, I know my place in this world.
Yeah, so I'm again kind of like we were talking about earlier, probably kind of a unique case because I do have my big girl job, and I make pretty good money. I travel quite a bit, and I enjoy it, pays the bills. But because of that, so if I had started wrestling like 5 or 6 years ago, or even earlier, and you asked me that question, I'd say Japan, like 100%. Mm-hmm. Now it's like, take the thought of taking like 6 weeks off to go across the world and leave my dogs and my husband isn't like as appealing, and not to mention the job. But like, so with that, I'd say these days, a lot of the bigger independents I'd like to work, but as far as the bigger name promotions go, Impact, because it's viable to like have the 9 to 5 and do the tapings outside of that. Went over to NXT thing, I'd fit in pretty well there. Ring of Honor has a really good thing going as well, but I'm not exactly a pure wrestler, so there's that. But yeah, AEW is fantastic, and it'd be great to be there with my homie Abaddon. WWE, man, they're I hate saying it because like their women's division is stacked, and like at the UK now, like I said, they've got Meiko Satomura, who's like the dream match for Heidi Howitzer. But I just do not like their programming, man. I hate their booking so much. I really do.
What about it that is not appealing to you?
I think they don't really do a lot of long-term storylines very well, and now that being said, I think the NXT booking is pretty well done, I'd say, but their main roster stuff, I don't think they always do their women justice on there. But that's also a side effect of them just having such a stacked roster and so many people, and having worked extra for both WWE and AEW now granted, worked extra to sit in catering, which was delicious. Worked extra for both of them. The backstage environment at AEW seems a lot better than the WWE backstage environment. That being said, WWE is a huge company, very corporate. So it's going to be different. It's much more. It's this huge mass-produced TV show. But with WWE, you kind of get shoved into a coat closet and said, it's super stressful, super, super, super stressful. You're just trying to like not shit yourself all day while you wait and find out what's going on. But AEW, it's, they're real welcoming there. You kind of feel like part of the family just showing up. So it's definitely a different atmosphere. But yeah, granted, if WWE was like, hey, Heidi Howitzer, you want a job? I don't know if I'd be like, no, WWE, that sounds terrible. But
how did this prank spam call get through?
Yeah, I feel like, yeah, exactly. I'm like, this, excuse me. You must have the wrong person. But no, all that being said, I really want to work a lot of the larger independents, and I very much like probably like Impact, something along those lines. I think short-term goals, I really want to be doing Mania Week on the Indies next year.
That would be awesome.
I'm on the cusp right now. I feel like I'm starting to get these bigger opportunities, and I want them to keep coming. But I'm also of that mindset, like I want to get better before they keep coming.
Yeah.
So I can take full advantage of it. So that's why I'm going to lucha training tonight, so I can botch arm drags for 2 hours.
Well, I just to piggyback off what you kind of said there, and I can kind of attest to that. I feel like a lot of the NXT stuff is well done. and the storytelling there is a lot better than it is on the main roster. And I think if you go on any of, the chat rooms or, dirt sheets online, you see the people commenting. I think a lot of people have that same kind of mindset that once you get to like the main roster, or, what they consider main roster, it's so like night and day with what they do with characters. And it's crazy. You see people like when you see, Rhea Ripley coming out to Monday Night Raw, and you see like some of these legends like Mick Foley saying like, don't screw this up. You know what I mean? Like, you hear like, the shout out to like Busted Open Radio, and you hear people like Bully Ray, and he's like, you don't have to change anything about her. You don't have to give her a new gimmick. You don't have to give her new, gear. You don't let her keep being the badass that she is, and for some reason, WWE, I don't know if it's, the different writers from different programming or like what the direction is, if it's Vince, if it's, Triple H, but for some reason, when they get to main roster, it's like they feel the need to kind of like blow up everything that made that person, gain a following and start anew. And then that's when it goes to shit.
Yeah, exactly. And that's like I said, like if you are predominantly like a character, WWE is kind of scary, because you don't know what they're going to do with you. And it's very much one of those things where it's like whatever they give you, you say yes sir, yes ma'am, and you fucking do it. So
and one of the pieces of advice that I heard somebody say, and I wish I knew who it was, I could kind of give them the credit for it, but if you're doing the Heidi thing, like trademark your name, trademark your style, your gimmick, because if WWE or I haven't heard any stories of AEW or anywhere else doing it, but definitely WWE, like own
your shit.
Oh yeah, own your name. Like if you don't trademark it and you go working for them and you start making a name for yourself, Heidi over there, and they trademark it before you do, guess what? When your time is done there, you can't use that later on. They basically own your soul, So it's
there's a lawyer who his thing is straight up. He's called like the gimmick lawyer, and that's what he does. Is he just like helps people trademark their gimmicks. Mm-hmm. And like so, the fact that there's someone who can make a living off of that says a lot.
Yeah, exactly. So, let everybody know before you start doing the lucha training and everything. Let everybody know where they can find you at online, because that's like the sole way of like getting your name out there in 2021 and beyond. Where can people find you at on all these socials and stay in touch with what you're doing?
Yeah, sure. So I actually made this really easy for everybody. I finally just made a link tree. So you can find my batch playlist on YouTube. You can find my merch stores on Brainbuster Tees and Pro Wrestling Tees. And you can find my Twitter, my Instagram, my YouTube. Email me to book me for stupid things. I don't care. Give me your money. It's all at linktr.ee/Thunderdome style. Exactly what it sounds like. So I can be found at Thunderdome style on most social media. The exception to the rule is Twitter, because it's too many letters. Thanks, Twitter. So there is no E in Thunder on Thunderdome style for Twitter. I don't use Facebook a lot, full transparency. So that page is usually kind of out of date. But my Twitter and my Instagram are typically pretty poppin'. So, check me out.
Well, definitely check her out on there. And I always tell people, if for some reason, like you're not a computer, suave or whatever, you could always just use Google, or use Siri. Hey, Siri, and then let her do all the hard work for you.
So check out the Daily Wrestling YouTube or go to my Twitter, Instagram. I'll be posting CW Women's Champion this month. So a good one to take a look at. And I also will have some upcoming bookings here in the next month or so with Max the Impaler. So you can see two big bad bitches, putting a hurting on everybody. The post-apocalyptic dream. So highly recommend that. But yeah, keep tabs on my social media, because we do have some stuff coming up here in Denver as well that I'm pretty excited to announce. So nothing I can actually say on here yet.
We just wish you all the success, and hopefully we see you next year during Mania Week, doing some of these big indie shows, and we can look back at this podcast later and, laugh at ourselves and say, hey, remember all the weird shit we were talking about? And like, now look at us, but no, it's been totally awesome having you on. And anytime you want to come back to the show, we're always welcome to have you back on. We'll even throw in some Taco Bell in there for you.
Oh, I love Taco Bell. Yes, please.
Well, we appreciate it, and hopefully, like I said, we hear and see and all kinds of new things from you in the future.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Heidi Howitzer here, a pro wrestler from a future with an endless war between babes and robots, and you are listening to MMB Radio.